So
he has the code, so he should call in, right?
Yeah, is he gonna do it so we can see him?
Yeah.
This is the little one?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Does anybody need headphones?
Yeah, there's headphones here. We only have, I don't know, you might pop out and ask.
I could do without.
Okay.
Or, yeah, I mean, do you want to use them?
It just helps. It helps you understand what your voice is doing.
Yeah.
You know. Plus, it looks cool. Like, we look professional.
Yeah. Look the part.
Bum, bum, bum. This is a good one.
Gina? No, not yet, but she knows. I just texted her.
So, did you guys have any part of the director's decision or identifying the work that you did? Like saying, I want to do it this way? Or did she, like, how the hell did she make you act like one of those freaking, what are those puppets called?
Oh my God. Those marionettes.
No, it was like
a windsock.
Yeah.
Windsock?
Yeah, I
the
just
windsock man? Like, how long did you do that? Like 20 minutes?
Did it seem like that?
Yeah.
It's probably like 6 minutes.
Wow, brilliant. Ignore the phone because
Gina and Lindsay and Carrie and I developed the original sort of framework and grant together. And, yeah, sort of wrote a bunch of material. And then Gina and Carrie worked a lot on developing what the show would look like.
Okay.
And then some decisions we all made in the room.
Yeah. Okay, that's the kind of thing I want to talk about, technical.
Yeah.
Then also about how it felt to you. Like, this is the feelings.
Yeah. Definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
You, baby, I'm loving you. I'm sending you love. I'm so grateful for that, being able to see that show.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you came. Which night did you come?
My heart is
What?
so
Which night?
First
did you
night.
come? Friday night. Oh, cool.
Yeah, what was your best night?
That was the best one.
Yeah. I the rawness of that open rawness. And I was going to try to get you guys to do another one, but I feel like it was a ritual. You know, like it had the sacred, impactful, and you filmed it, right?
Yeah.
Is it but it was only one view film, right? It wasn't like you had spaced out cameras?
We had someone filming it each night, I think from different angles.
Cool.
Yeah, and he filmed a run through before the show too.
Oh,
so he'll kind of patch them together, maybe all together. There's so much going on stage too, you know.
This is also recording right now. I wish we were doing this on live, Facebook Live.
If you can get a link for it, I could put the link to. I don't know.
Can you send the link to her?
But I don't know. Could people view it without joining the Zoom call? Because that would be what it would be.
We could just put it on Facebook.
I put up a link that it's happening, or a thing on our page saying it's happening.
Well, we'll just record it and put it up after.
I want people to join it. Yeah.
So, and next time, Bianca, we're gonna have to figure out how to do more stuff like that because how cool.
Yeah, I mean, if it's possible for people to be able to call in and ask questions, cool.
No, I don't have the capability of handling board and phone, so
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not gonna happen. Bum, bum, bum,
Do you want me to text?
Okay, get ready.
Okay.
4, 3, 2 and a half. All right, thank you for that. Beautiful Burn One Down with Ben Harper. So obviously you guys have probably caught on to the theme out there that for some reason we're talking about marijuana on Honey Culture Radio. All the music that I was sharing were all weed songs, and wow, and it's so interesting because I'm from the majorly pre-legal world. You know, my entire life, marijuana was always illegal and dangerous and bad, and you got in trouble and you never wanted people to find out, and people were smoking weird stuff like out of paper bags, and it, you know, now I know it was the trim, and you know, it was just a whole different world in the whole marijuana, and that, you know, before whenever this last few years that it got legalized. And I just wanted to tell you one really interesting story that is, I think, interesting, but it really shows, it might show what this was like. Maybe, I guess it was when I was in college, so in the 80s. So I used to deliver newspapers, and I'd get up at 5 in the morning and go take newspapers all around the dorms. And there was a quad, which is like 4 buildings facing one open courtyard. And I'm just it's not quite light out. And I stumble into this courtyard, and shockingly, I see like 5 or 6 black unmarked vehicles men with guns and dogs and people, all over the place, and they say shh, and they tell me to get out of there, and it's a raid. There's a raid going down in my college. Well, as it turns out, the person that they raided, and this was FBI, the whole 9 yards, like huge, huge thing. What they were doing, and this is a true story. This guy was, before the internet really started, he figured out about international trade, and he was 19 years old, and he was trading Afghani hash for lumber from Brazil and trading it for something else in China, and then making so much money. We couldn't believe it. And before this raid happened, I literally saw one of those big bricks of hash, which was probably the size, I don't know, my hands, how big is that? Like 2.5 feet by maybe 18 inches and maybe 2 inches thick, with a gold stamp that said product of Afghanistan on it. So that was when Russia and America were fighting over Afghanistan, and Afghanistan was being overrun. So interesting story. Don't know what it means, but there's a little bit more history. This was in Minnesota. And this is a little bit of more history on top of the history lesson we're going to get today about the Illinois Valley. So Bianca's here, and you all know Bianca because she's my co-host. Hey, baby.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Laura.
And you gave me the opportunity and the invitation to come see this play, and I'm forever changed. I couldn't shake this. I wouldn't call it a play, really, this production. I couldn't shake it out of my head for days, and I was calling the people that I knew to see it, to process it, and just all we could do is just gush about how amazing it was on so many levels, and we're going to try to get into that. So why don't you set up again for the people what this play is, or this performance was about. And for those of you that listened last week, the director, Gina, was here while Bianca was hard at work in her rehearsal. So, and all of these lovely folks were hard at work in the rehearsal. So why don't you introduce who's here and say what they did in the theater, and introduce the play again.
I'd love to. And first, I would love to gush back at Laura that your recommendation means so much, because I, and I'm talking to all the listeners out there, hold Laura's quality of just like your insight and your perspective in such high esteem.
Oh,
yeah. So
thank you.
It means a lot to me and to us. I'm here today. I'm so excited to be talking post this like collective grieving ritual, which was the whole for Southern Oregon, but also a celebration of who we are as a people. With two of my best friends and also cast members, Elliott and Sophie Traub. And we were all in the cast together, and I'll just speak for myself when I say that first and foremost, this production was, for me, in its significance, it was the culmination of a dream come true, in that I got to work with two really close friends on some place-based local art, significant to where I live and social justice oriented in its theme, and also getting paid as artists while living rurally. So
wow, that's really next level.
Yeah, on several fronts, like with friends, so with dear ones, and also getting paid while creating art rurally, and also it got to be place-based and significant to the community in which I live. And so in that regard, this is probably the most radical art production that I've ever been involved in, and also the most significant to me. And I think that that's a lot of what the whole is also about. Like, microcosm meets the macrocosm. Like, its significance to me is also what the whole's about. The whole is about the whole, with the W in it, and how we can overcome some of the experiences of isolation, of disconnectedness, of disassociation that can happen living rurally, and actually further connect with each other, create more significant ties for emotional and economical well-being. And so releasing some of the patterns that happen to exist out here in rural Southern Oregon, but also all of rural America, of labor exploitation as well as exploitation of the land, and how those two things are connected. And how can we overcome that by getting a better look at each other, looking each other in the eye, and working together in more meaningful ways.
You know, one of the things that I want to say about that is what that is that is a beautiful interpretation, but the actual raw embodiment of the work really, you know, the visual experience of it told a story actually on such a deep level that I think everybody in the audience was exhausted. Like, you guys worked so hard. You worked so hard that they were just like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I just can't believe it. And one of the scenes that y'all did was during intermission, the dancers kept working. You did what, a jump up, a squat, a back roll up, and a jump up or something like that for like the entire 15-minute time, like showing that the workers work and work and work and work and work and never stop working. I mean, and as a field worker myself, we start about now and we go until the bitter end, and we usually pull 10, 15-hour days, if we're lucky, at this time anyway, to try and get these products out, you know. So I've become intimate with that experience, and also having witnessed what happened to the weed industry, right? I think you would be a great person to talk about that, because you were what's your name, Sophie? Mm-hmm. Sophie was the big man. So let me describe your character. This play opens up with musical chairs, and it's a very vibrant, fun game. Everybody's having a great time, and it's super energetic. I mean, right away, it's like a hoedown on crack. I mean, it's just, it's like,
so real.
I know. The energy was like, in that beginning, I was like, holy cow, this was like ADHD times 10, you know. It was just, and what happens is Sophie's a very tall, beautiful woman here in the, I'm sorry, my gender, I know that this has a whole gender expression as a little bit older. I'm learning these terms, so please correct me if my gender assignments are. And
I go by she, that's fine.
She, okay, yeah, thank you.
And we do have a couple trans people in the cast. So
yes, then I want to speak about that.
Yeah.
I want to speak about that, because to me that was a really vital part of the way that this was expressed, and it educated me in my heart in so many great ways, just visually watching this performance of the transgender experience and so forth. But anyway, the character you played was the big man, and so you're a very tall, beautiful woman, and you start out and you basically win because you sort of move the chair and you spin the chair so the short person can't get on the chair, and you end up with the getting on the chair, and everybody's having a great time. It's all fun and games, but you win, right? And so you're like, I won, and then the play changes to where we're seeing there's field workers and there's this parachute silk, and you end up eating the fields basically and putting it in. You get on stilts, and now you have these big pants on, and you're stuffing the fields into the pants. And what your character does, it gets more looming and larger and more frantic and more disconnected, and becomes both ridiculous and terrifying. That's what it was to me. So this was the character that you played. Walk us through, what was that like? What was the role? How did you interpret the role of the big man in this production?
Yeah, well, there were many, many conversations we had along the way about who this character represents. You know, I think in some ways it was a ruthless representation of the winner, the one who continues to win, the privileged, the accumulation of wealth and privilege, to the point of kind of becoming a representation of something inhuman. You know, by the end, I think the character I'm playing, is actually no longer really a human. And in fact, like, it's so big, you know, it rises above the sort of economic woes of the middle and lower class, such that, you know, I become full of air and then just sort of blow away, literally.
Yeah, and the visual of that was, you said 6 minutes, I say a half an hour, of you acting like one of those sock announcement, those loony clown things that are full of air and that go flutter, 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 fold, flutter, 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 full, flutter. And you're doing this up on a cherry picker at the top of the rafters of this monstrous like auditorium, and your body goes all the way down to the ground, and you have a great big red tie, and we're all afraid that you're going to fall out and crash down, and yet it was this complete containment of that, and it really expressed that crazy, gluttonous, ruthless, but ridiculous aspect of it. It has not even a real man. It's nothing real to it anymore, but it's pulling the puppet strings. Yeah.
As a performer, this was a really interesting role to play. Something I've not quite been asked to do before. I think at once it required a kind of compassion that I don't think I usually exercise. And in conversations with people who had seen the piece or had seen works in progress, we talked a lot about the way that sort of gluttony is linked to scarcity. And so actually as performances went along, I realized that in those early stages of the performance, I found it really important to actually feel like I was a loser in order to attach to winning. And then I think something else I discovered through performing the piece was that a lot of what was happening on stage was that I was prioritizing my own pleasure in spite of the suffering of others, which I think is often how privilege functions. And sort of noticing that happening in microcosms all the way through the show was a really interesting exploration, in terms of me personally, as well as sort of projecting into bigger privilege than I have access to, and then finally, I'm inviting such negative projections from the audience. I found through doing the performance, I had to sort of put up a shield eventually around my own body, because after the first performance, I felt nauseous, because I'm literally, I want to invite negative projections on this character, and given the political moment we're in, there's so much angst and anger around this kind of figure necessarily. And I needed, and I sort of had to figure out how to invite that anger and that fury, because it contributes to the catharsis of the piece as a whole.
Did you feel people reacted to that character with that kind of aggression? Did you see it? Like, were they looking at you funny?
There was one person that I remember, I think it was Finn, asked, what was your reaction? A friend of Finn's. And they said that, or maybe it was you too, they said that the play made them want to,
assassinate the man.
Okay, yes. Assassinate the man. Right,
man.
So I completely understand. Sophie wanted to put boundaries and shields around Sophie's body, right? But invite the projections for the man.
But I think it was mixed. Yeah, there's a point. I am doing a lot of really dissonant things during the piece. So there are some moments I'm, for instance, at one point I'm inviting the audience to party with me while the rest of the performers are sort of suffering. And it's very obvious from an audience point of view, once the sort of gimmick of my size has worn off, that they are being asked to do something quite horrific by me, and they don't participate. And I get a lot of glares during that section. And so certainly I have to kind of protect myself in that, or negotiate that section to keep partying in this horrible moment. But then also I spoke to some people who had some kind of experience in their life with wealth or great power, and they identified with that character. And it was, I think, and they identified with all the characters in different ways. And that was significant also to realize we all have that run-in with power, and we can all relate to that in a certain way.
Yeah, but you did that part so good, I just reject your idea. Because how am I ever gonna, that? You did that role so well that the concept of, we all knew who we were looking at. We're looking at the big patriarchal archetype of hilarious ferocity, you really, for me, I think you used the word compassion, having compassion for that character. My father called it the second level of hell. And it's from the, I think, Buddhist, where the second level is where they have a little tiny mouth and a great big tummy. And they just keep feeding because they've got to feed the void. So in a sense, your character was the demon of the second level of hell there, the gluttonous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's an actual archetype. And the way you just expressed it and the work that you had to do is exactly what I was talking about before you guys came on, about shamanic work for the good of the community, that you held, through one of the kinds of theaters that we do in the world, not the state-sanctioned theaters, the purified, boiled down, brain-soaking theaters, but this kind of raw Shakespearean, which is what this was to me. It was that level of depth and breadth in the work, that you really embodied this archetype and gave people that whipping post, and it really was impressive. And all that being said, it was only one small part of the piece. Here it was one of the major aspects, but only one small part of the piece. And you, Elliott, Elliott, you were part of the ensemble of dancers that was, it was a little harder, Sophie's piece was huge and obviously, took center stage. And then there was other characters that were just like out there weird, like just randomly, like the mother person in the front, and then the little 6-year-old Finn, and then the grandmother, who were these wonderful restful pieces in the theater, because it was such a frantic presentation that you needed somewhere just to land, and it almost marked time by their slow movements as witnesses throughout the piece. But can you talk about the body? So the body of the people, can you tell us about the different characters and what was your character, and how did you see that play part? Like Sophie so nicely did with her, expression. How do you see what was the role that you held, and would you speak for the other dancers that were working with you?
Sure. One quick correction. Actually, the Silas is 7.
Silas.
He played the child, Silas Ocean, and Finn Franklin is 15 and was also one of the ensemble members.
Oh, right.
Might be joining us today.
And that was the one that was I felt Finn's. Oh, thank you for clarifying. Finn was a pure. His performance was absolutely pure. There was no artifice in his performance. It was so anchored in purity. And a wholeness of expression that he really, to me, embodied the soul of that work, just with the level that he, all were top notch, but something about his being seen to me was really powerful. And we can talk about that in a minute, but let's go. Tell me more about the theater.
Sure, the kind of character. Well, I think it makes sense a little to back up to the kind of pieces emergence and how those characters came through.
Yes.
And I wanted to add to what Fox or Bianca, to what you were saying, that to my mind, this piece came from at least 2 places. One of them is that a lot of the performers are educators for River Stars Performing Arts. And I worked for River Stars in the first 2 years that it was founded. Gina and Lindsay B. Jones were also part of that kind of founding team.
And Gina is the director.
And she was the choreographer and director for the show. Yeah. And River Stars is an incredible free after-school dance and theater training for kids in the Illinois Valley. And at this point, it's like at capacity, right? I mean, and doing so much work to cultivate audience and a love of performance and like trained kids in a place where there's not a lot going on otherwise. Different perspectives, but and so one of the questions that came up through our work with River Stars was, how are the arts, like, how is this economically sustainable? With Gina's leadership and among all of the educators, like, gosh, we've gotten so many grants, and Oregon Community Foundation grant helped to found the program, and many other funders since then. But like, what is this more sustainable model for nourishing the arts as a really core part of rural communities, and really looking at arts and agriculture, like care for land, care for community, as like 2 core aspects of
permaculture, sort of a permaculture
definitely
vibe,
so I think that was one of the questions, like, how do we sustain the arts? And then looking at, like, gosh, there's a lot of money in our community that never makes it to the school or to the arts, and trying to kind of figure out how to work with that. Certainly not, there's definitely folks who are growing weed, whether that's 6 plants or whether it's 50 plants, or was, and putting energy and money back into the community. And there was like millions and millions of dollars that are coming through that community that don't make it to the kids who are growing up there. So that kind of question. And then around the same time, like 2016 election, Trump got elected. One of the most divisive issues around that was the economy. And like the folks that I was talking with who were voting for Trump were saying, like, this is for economic reasons.
Right. And also I think that's a cultural, what I think was that we're seeing the fade out of the patriarchal systems, and that the man that was left behind is this working class, patriotic, believing in these certain way, believing that they need to smash the intellectualism and the separateness and the corruption. And he came up very spirited, quote unquote, telling the truth about the corruption, and unfortunately we're seeing exposure of yet more corruption. So I'm with them. Let's expose the corruption, but let's do it across the line if we're going to, anyway, that's another story. But you're right, like that was very divisive. Economy was the number one, and and the way this play developed was from hundreds of hours of interviews.
Right, that's what I was just going to say. I mean, so poor people voting on the right, poor people voting on the left, like what we have in common is like this hustle, which you see in the rat wheels and the intermission and the kind of physical endurance test for that kind of core ensemble experience.
That physicality was called the rat wheels.
Yeah.
So what I see it.
Yeah.
It basically was like running, going around, jumping up and down. I now see a perfect, using that symbolism. Great. Okay,
Yeah.
Keep going. Tell us more.
And so we got this funding from the MAP Fund and from Oregon Humanities that supported doing a bunch of community interviews and story circles. So Gina and Lindsay and Carrie interviewed like over 50 folks in the community, and we led a couple story circles. And through that, I think a lot of things came through, and so much and in so many directions, asking questions like, how has legalization impacted you? But also questions like, what does true wealth mean to you? And what is success? And what were your dreams for yourself as a kid? And what are they now? And what do you want for your children? And so much came out in so many directions, And so the characters, which I think it'd be worth naming. So in that core kind of chorus, there's Finn Franklin played the filler. Fox played
Jazz.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like can I speak to
please.
a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I really identify with her. And actually, I feel like I'm holding a little memorial service for her currently post-show because Jazz and Fox are actually very similar. Like Jazz is this like really spirited young female who is kind of like down with the system, down with the man. I just want to be independent. And so she kind of hits the road. She's like a street kid, traveling, freewheeling. But we all know that, that's a rough life. So she also then leads into addiction. And then eventually, in the play, she rolls off the stage.
I know, that was really disturbing because I was waiting for you in the final lineup and I was like, she's gone. Like, I couldn't understand what happened. I thought you hurt yourself or something. But yeah, you did. That was so authentic in the play. You became an addict and rolled off the stage. Like, nope, gone. Some person who was in this money and disenfranchised and now has no meaning in society, like, because it's over. Yeah. There's no place for you. So there was Jazz and
then Lindsay B. Jones played the kid clown, which is a persistently kid-like, innocent, energized character who also tells this kind of bouffon story in the middle of like, no, this show is boring. We're all doing this angsty modern dance. Let me tell you a really entertaining story, about testicle juice. And I played the economist, which feels a little close to my heart because as also like a scholar, thinker, I get a little bit up in my head. Like the economist wants to figure it out, wants to like do public polling, turn everything into numbers, is like also convinced that through analysis and numbers and research that like he can figure out the right thing. And by advising people properly on where and how to invest, that, that like that capitalism is also going to work, and then I think there's this critical, and there's a couple different.
Stop.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the best of the divine masculine right there. The ability to process data in these flowcharts and maps is a very masculine way. You're removing yourself from the experience or the history or the emotion of it. And you're saying, well, if we go this way and that way, and that's why society has grown so well, is because we have that masculine ability in the world. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think, I'm just mentioning that there was another archetype there, another sacred archetype, the masculine that's trying to make the order out of the, try to create the profit. But go ahead and keep going.
Well, and that character also is like, in the sort of internal story, has this relationship with the man at the beginning, like as kids. And then at some point kind of looks at this rat wheel, goes back, walks back to the stage, reapproaches the man, And there's this like exchange. There's a handshake and a petting of the head, and then leaves, comes back on the stage with a carpet bag, scoops up the whole valley, and then comes back on as a kind of as a grower, like as somebody who like identified an investment opportunity, had some backing, was able to like drop money at the right time, which is a huge part of the story in the Illinois Valley, whether it's locals or whether it was folks, you know, saying like, oh, legalization is happening. This is a good chance to like buy up that cheap clear cut land and start something that's gonna maybe in the next few years make me some bucks, you know? Yeah, so then there's also this, you know, really key and almost in a different realm, although they intersect, but this triangle of the wound and the mother and the soul of money.
Yes, that was so profound. Those three characters. It was interesting. The soul of money. I didn't look at the names until the end, and what I saw her as completely the quote unquote divine feminine movement of what's happened as for the women here. Because during the end of the illegal period and the beginning of the legalization period, we saw this huge rise in our cultural expression of femininity. And it was this, you know, very sexualized abundance. They were praying for abundance. The sister circles hit the valley, which is a sort of what has been legally called a pyramid scheme, and according to the people that did it was just investing in your community scheme, where they were taking the money away from the man and sharing cash awards to different groups as you moved up in levels. And you know, just like the weed industry, people bought into it and bought out early, and they're the ones that bought the house with the sister circle money. And then there's 6 or 8 people that were left behind. Now the movement's panned out or flattened out, and there's no more money to get from the sister circles. And so to me, watching her do that was watching that the way the feminine was rising in that. First of all, look at the weed plant. She is a tortured feminine plant used to get mostly men high. And the way that she gets her big buds, and I cannot lie, is by starving her and removing men from her environment and forcing her through food and certain applications to get bigger and better than all the other ones. And then they call them my girls even, you know, so that feminine, it's almost like what was happening to the women here. And the women were making the money, because by the time we get down to trimming, that's a woman's area of expertise. And all these growers want the young, pretty girls, but part of it is because they have the best eyes and fastest hands for the work. And it also goes along with the girls, my trimming girls, you know. So to me, I saw her, and she didn't interest me as much, even though she's a phenomenal performer for real. And I like later that I found out it was the soul of money as we look at the archetype. But the fracture, the wound is a fracture, and then there was the mother.
Yeah, so Erica Moore played the mother, and Isadora Malay the fracture. Yeah, and Carrie Quidham played the soul of money.
Okay, both of them genius. And both of them genius in 2 completely different ways. The mother had a stillness in her performance, even though I think she jumped up and danced and did a bunch of crazy stuff. But in my visual memory, she is she was right in front of me on the stage, but she was front and center. And from the simple act of pouring water and pouring water, she was in a full sweat. She had dedicated her body just as much as the rest of you athletes, and dedicated her body to that performance. And because she was a person of color, also represented our indigenous people, all of our mothers, all of our grandmothers, all our forgotten, just the workers that work behind the scenes that just keep it all together, keep it all together, keep it all together. So she was, and played the most sacred. I mean, she held the sacred tone, I felt, by witnessing that. But the fracture, can we talk about her for a minute? 14 years old. Is she like trained since birth to dance?
She's Gina's daughter.
Oh my gosh.
So yes.
Dyed in the wool.
Yes.
Didn't fall far from the tree.
No, right? Like what a dream come true for them.
I don't mean to overuse the word genius, but this has to do with Gina. Genius.
Gina.
Yeah, Gina the genius.
I'll take it.
I know, that's her new name in my book. I'm going to put that in my phone when she gives me her number. So, but the level of dedication that Gina brought out of each of the people was so profound that each one represented this authenticity, a self-created, embodied authenticity of their role, an athletic, embodied expression of the role. And then Gina, as the fracture, broke everybody's heart in that whole place, because she was this pure, I mean, her expression was far beyond her years. I mean, her expression was everybody's memory of having an experience of exploitation. Like any way you slice it, whether it's worker, sex, youth, beauty, vulnerability. It was actually the most uncomfortable part of the performance, when the crew turns on her and gnaws her actual physical body and pulls out ribbons of her out of her outfit, which you don't know that are in her outfit until that happens. And all of a sudden you're seeing these blood ribbons just, being pulled apart in front of you. And her level, all of their authenticity was great, but she just so embodied the muse and the beauty of nature and all those things. And I mean, I can't, there are no words. That's why I could say no words about this one, because she was absolutely purified, a muse.
I think something also incredible about is being 14 is that we all worked really, really hard for this piece. We had a 5-week rehearsal process. Isa was in high school and also coming to rehearsals afterward, so she was probably the least present at rehearsals, but also in a way like the most just kind of I guess just like, how would you put it? Like, I mean, she's a fast learner, or just like learning on the go, or just keeping up. In a way, I think like she just didn't even rehearse a lot. She was just being like authentically present and like being completely like just the pure instinct of the fracture and the wound.
You grow up in a temple and you don't have to act like a priestess,
right?
So that's what happened there. And it's just it's saying, it's what she probably, it's so authentic to her that. But anyway, the again, another just gorgeous pure performance. And are we missing people? Anybody? Okay, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's interesting that you're using the word pure, because part, I think, of the sort of conceptual background to the wound or the fracture is that actually we are born already fractured. Like our entry to the world, encountering, what is that initial fracture. And then there are all these things that happen. And so over the course of the show, there's like early in the first act, there is the wound, the fracture has an interaction with each of the characters that is some kind of initial fracturing, and then by the end of the first act, the chorus all turns on her, and that's like the weaponizing of that wound, which then the capitalism, it weaponizes that to sell us back our own healing or balm or work as healing or whatever, whatever the addictions, the workaholism, whatever it is, to try to, kind of fill that void. So to me also, I'm like, gosh, there is no purity in this piece. Like there is no one who is clean. There is no one who is out. Because we're all complicated and messy.
Right. And for me, the purity was in the authenticity of the commitment. And also, I saw each of those characters as pretty, maybe the dancers not so much, because there was a little more muddiness, like what's going on, but at least the major rules that we were tracking, they were absolutely, even the big man, because you talked about the compassion aspect of it, he was one of us. He was a wounded part of us. He, because you guys played it to a sacred ritual level, it held a purity in those archetypes. And there's the wound, and the grief is also pure. The anger is also pure, like self-destruction has a purity to it, because each person is that innocent inside that is just part of this bigger movement, like going along with the wave. So I agree with you. Yes, we are all fractured. Yes, there is the wound there. But yes, I also believe that you also showed the purity of that soul, the soul of that archetype. And I think that's what I'm speaking to, and also the level of commitment. So did we miss any of the actors? We had the grandmother.
Silas and Andrea. Well, they were, so Andrea and Silas were, witnesses, really, and they circle the whole stage through the course of the performance, and then at the end,
Oh God, the tears everywhere.
they meet with the wound, and there's this dance that's also happening there. You know what? Honestly, I'm like, my back is always to that part. You know,
I can speak to it a little bit because that's after I fall off the stage. Yeah, I think it's significant that we're talking about the fracture as actually being one of the leading roles around this piece, and so one of the biggest motifs and themes, because, and this concept about purity, because I heard you, Laura, mention the word ritual a few times, and I think by the end of the third performance, I realized with every fiber of my being that this play is not just entertainment.
Right.
This was actually a collective grieving process. This was a ritual for our valley and for our community, and it really, because I have never, like in that production, as a performer, felt the wall between performer and audience collapse the way that I have with this production, with this piece, where I really felt like one with everyone there, and completely connected emotionally, and broken open together, around things that we need to talk about, like we need to feel together in order to heal together, really. And so by the end, yes, like the witnesses, young Silas and then also Andrea, so they represent sort of like the descendant and the elder, and they witness the whole piece, and then they come together and they hold the fracture. And I feel like that's part of what this piece is also trying to convey, is that we're born with this fracture, we're born with this wound, maybe with this emptiness, and it's not so much about like trying to make it go away. It's actually about holding that we are all vulnerable, like deeply, permanently, irreconcilably, and perfectly vulnerable, and that's the most precious part of us, that also is our means to connection, and it's our means to being stronger together, and to feeling supported.
What I was talking about, well, you guys were driving in, so I don't think you heard, but what I was talking about is ritual theater, or theater taken to a shamanic level. And in the beginning of our last hour, I talked about shamanism being an appropriated word, but we're going to have to use it in this context because there is no better word, but something that is a medicine person that can take people through an experience and heal them. And so to me, when we start talking about this classic shamanic theater, or really, I can't say any other word about it. I just don't know. I want to know another word.
I could use another example. Finn, his father, after our final performance in Tacoma, for giving back to the community, right? We did this play by the community, then for the community. He approached me and he mentioned, he was like, "Do you know what a keener is?"
Oh yeah, right.
And he said that in Irish culture, that there was somebody, they were called a keener. I don't know if they already had that role within the community, or if they just spontaneously ended up embodying it by going out and public grieving.
Yeah, it was a way people could make money too. They totally, like, I will wail at your funeral so that other people will break down and cry too, right? And this was all over the world, like all societies. You have professional keeners at the party, but that even is unlimited. I mean, that's one aspect of it for sure. But really, to me, the power of it, and the power of all theater and media, is to shift consciousness. And this piece had a purpose, a design, a story, a full breadth of experience that took us all through a ritual of understanding what just happened. What the heck just happened in our community? Because 7 years ago, $300 a pound, baby, and now we're like, woo, 100, woohoo. Just like they talked about in that. And then the other thing about this was just about the staging, because we talked about the musical chairs, we talked about the route wheel, we talked about the super huge crazy figure of the big man. But what happens in the characters is they all start out in very colorful clothes with cute little hairstyles and stuff, and then because they're sweating through their clothes and everything, by the end they've taken off their outer costume and everybody's in nude colored clothing. And now the spirit of money, which was dancing from corner to corner and all around, and everybody's having fun with her, and it was a big party, now is being rolled from one back to the other back and back again. And I'm getting chills on it. And then we're having this relationship with money where it's like, okay, I'll give you this, and then you give them that, and then it'll come back to me. I'm a massage therapist, and then you're going to sell the organic produce, and then they're going to bring it back to me in honey, and this is how we're going to make that last little bit go around, and pretty soon the soul of money loses her outfit too. So even she no longer has power in this environment, and so symbolically, what you just did in that piece is you gave us a way to process major archetypes that is damaging our society. And wheat is just an example. It could be almonds, it could be oranges, it could be wheat, it could be canola oil, it could be sex trade, it could be, Starbucks, all of these corporate entity extraction economy. Corporate entities married to extraction economy. That is the archetypal story of the entire country right now. Not only with the actual 3D products, but Earth versus man. So what you truly did, I mentioned this to you before, if we lived in the temple days back in pre-Greek Minoan era, and I have my dream job, which is the high priestess of the political and spiritual advice of the community. And I work with this amazing team of people that have just come up through, studied with me for years, and I've studied for years and years and years, and I have all this authority of identifying great theater, and I would choose you.
Gosh, I'm like, that sounds like what you're doing right now.
And for the audience that you can't see, but you might be able to see on top when we publish this, we've been recording, so we're gonna share it with the people out in the world in our media. But I am giving you each a gold laurel leaf crown, and one of each for each of you, and here's a bunch to carry back to all of your producers and light people and writers and your community, because really you deserve it. It was absolutely great. So what more to say about this?
I think I have one thing I heard as you were speaking so beautifully about the power of theater and ritual. I heard Gina in my head, and she's probably in the car somewhere, maybe listening right now. And I heard her saying, "Oh, this is about dance too, and the power of dance."
That's right.
And what is it? Recently, we learned like the number of schools in Oregon that have theater programs is way under 5%. Dance programs is like 0.2. But that part of what is powerful and ritual and fierce about this performance was that it was dance-based, it was body-based, it was movement-based, and that dance has so much power to work on like an emotional, spiritual level, to take these conceptual things, because even me as the economist, like playing the economist in my head, it's like, how does this fallout of things that have happened in the Illinois Valley relate to like the stock market? Like they're just so distant. And the language of economics, I tried to read all these economics books to kind of prepare for this, but it's like this language of vulnerability, of ritual, like it is not in those books.
Right.
But dance is a language to like to work on this level. Not to say it's the only one, and I want to see more flourishing of art, like approaching these issues.
You're absolutely right. And also finally some dance that was taken out of just being sexy realm. What a refreshing thing. Yeah, what a refreshing thing to use your bodies to express hardships and politics and hopes and joys and stories and everything, and really, I totally see what you're talking about, and I think it's incredibly valuable. And this style was modern dance, and Gina is Isadora Duncan trained, something like that, or what?
That's one of her
one of her
one of her mentors, and Isadora Malay's namesake. But Gina ran a hip hop modern company called Evoke, like social justice, hip hop dance in San Diego for many years.
Well, we're very fortunate to have her.
And is now based in Talent and is looking for people who want to dance.
Oh, so I might want to do that.
Reach out.
Close, if you can do it with short little legs and close to the earth.
Definitely.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So, am I right when I saw your? Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, one other thing that Gina talks about, and that I think the piece touches on, is actualism. And and which in my mind relates to documentary dance theater, which is what this piece was sort of tagged as, you know, and Gina, working with Evoke for 15 years in San Diego, you know, sort of coined this term for her own work, documentary dance, which is dance based on interviews from a community and then sort of lifting up their story through it. And I think there's a way in which the relationship of the performers and the interviewees, you know, sort of the desired when you get interviews from people, it's such a vulnerable act to be interviewed. And so the desire to have reciprocity with people means that I think the stakes of what you put on stage are lifted. It's like we want to respond to you, we want to lift up your stories, we want to, you know, show you the beauty of yourself and also engage with you, with, you know, engage with what you've shared in a really meaningful way. And then actualism, Gina refers to as, like, for instance, the rat wheels that these performers were doing during the intermission. When they broke down and were exhausted and crying, that was because they were exhausted and crying and reaching a real wall. And the sort of call to go to those edges is because we're dealing with actual life, actual issues. And so we need to, you know, put actual stakes on stage.
Oh, and you did.
So
as an elder, because I would say that I'm an elder compared to this, the majority of the people in this play, it was also seeing our young people being forced to do this kind of thing. Instead of being able, you know, like having to work like that, instead of doing the things like we want to, like when we're talking about the industry, not the arts. So when we're looking at the industry, doing that kind of work in order to serve the man, and losing self and losing community and just being hyper focused on that. But yet the dance expression actually gave us the opposite. It gave us the self-determination, compassion for the experience, maybe even that sense of justice versus injustice, you know, and you know, also the impotency of maybe our position as well in a lot of ways. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the dance, and I'm glad you're talking about actualism, and really, for me, that kind of ritual is far more transformative than most rituals that we see in our public, even spiritual rituals that we see in our public, because of that, the goal and the expression, the authenticity to which you delivered. So work for the future. Is there anything more you all want to say about the play? Because I want to hear more about what's going to happen too, and make sure that we do this before we end our show.
I guess since Gina isn't here, I have one more Gina quote that I want to share. I feel like each one of us is like sharing, like, in Gina's words. And one of the, you know, in theme of what we're talking about, one of the things that I heard her say that has really stuck with me throughout this process is, if we don't cry, who are we?
Right.
Like, who even are we?
Right.
And that has really helped me throughout this whole process open up my heart and also open up my body to be in solidarity with all of the hard workers of America and of the world.
Right.
And to open up to the compassion, to the grief, to the authenticity of what people are enduring physically and emotionally every day, every week, you know, every year. And that really helped me. And I think that, you know, I think hopefully it helped everybody who watched it.
Right. So you mentioned this several times. We need to spend a moment with this one. Grief. A ritual of grief. You said something like that. You also had, I don't know if it was every night, but the night that I saw, we witnessed you breaking down after the rat reel, which I knew because I've been tracking you, that you've been working so hard on this play, like you can even talk on the phone. So, you know, we lost you. I was like, Gina, when you're done, we get Bianca back. So like I knew the level that you put into it, and your tears were really broken down. And everybody that saw that knew exactly why you cried, because we all felt the same way at some time in our life, just that bone tired exhaustion and dealing with all the garbage that you have to deal with. But this concept of grief and this concept of being in the 6th level of extinction, the fact that we just watched another monocrop just take down hundreds and thousands of acres right in front of our eyes, and as pollinator activists, we know that whole species of bees could be threatened with extinction just for the fact that we've added a new monocrop, you know. And I'm seeing this is affecting you still right now.
Yeah,
and that's making me want to cry.
Yeah.
So,
if we don't cry, who are we?
I know. So the grief of how do we process the grief, and what better than to have an archetypal gift from these generous bodies to do that labor for us, to show us our own story. And thank you for doing the keening for us, and showing us the, like, oh yeah, I am pretty tired. Like I saw that and I'm like, I'm tired too. Like, I get that. Like, we're all just fighting for this little tiny bit of change, to live and month to month. And, I just really.
You know what I was really crying about?
What?
My parents. I was missing my parents. In that moment, I was just like, I miss my mom and dad. And I think that in a way that is really connected to a lot of this, which is like a lot of us are really, we don't live with our families anymore.
No, we're divorced from origin.
Distanced.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't live further across the country.
Right.
In this day and age, I think that's really normal.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad.
And there's a lot of parentless children in this, adult children, right?
Yeah. And that feels like a symptom of this world of divide and conquer and go wherever the jobs are.
Yeah, manifest destiny and the American dream. Both of those things do not include parents or children, really. You're always supposed to go to a new town and leave your parents behind. That is the ritual of American adulthood, is you go to college in another town, you start a job, whatever, and you pretty much want to be better than them, in some way. And that's how we're raised. We're not raised to honor, not that we should, I'm not saying we should, because we have colonial a-holes in doing all this stuff, but I hope that didn't get me in trouble. I'm sorry. Okay, but anyway, the one I do want to say, so I think we did a really great wrap up on this play, and I want to see more of this theater. I want to support in any way I can, including bring it to the station. Let's work, do all this stuff out loud here, and share it with the community and get them revved up to see it. But I real quickly, and we only have literally 4 minutes. You did some prison work. Was that you, Sophie? Somebody had done work in, I want to say Alcatraz or something.
Oh, that's on my resume, but that's a misunderstanding.
Oh, okay.
I've done some work on Groundworks, or on a project called Groundworks, which is in partnership with Dancing Earth, which is an pan-indigenous dance company here on the West Coast. And there's a sun ceremony that happens on Alcatraz Island. It's an indigenous celebration of the sun ceremony, and I've worked with a company to support the technical aspect of some of the performance development they've been doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say that's some bold stuff.
That's good to know that was misleading in that way, because I don't want to misrepresent the work I'm doing. So
well, I just glanced at it. I didn't. Maybe I read it wrong, but well, that's cool. So what else? What's in the future?
Should we do more?
Do more.
Should we do more?
Yes.
Should we keep doing it?
Yes.
Should we keep going? Should we keep going? Should we keep going?
I don't know what I want to do, but yeah, let's do it. Let's do more and more of this beautiful expression.
Well, one thing that we could say, I think, is that Beyond Boom and Bust was the original name that applied for the grant, and the whole came out of the interview process and so on and so forth. But Beyond Boom and Bust has developed into a multi-year initiative, and all of the core collaborators who are involved with Beyond Boom and Bust are really seeing it as a multi-year initiative that is aimed at building economic resiliency through the arts in the Illinois Valley and Southern Oregon.
Oh yeah.
So this piece is the first sort of instantiation of that project, and I think we're kind of, recovering from the performances and thinking through what the next steps are. The piece is, intact and very performable at this point. So I think we've talked about, applying for some touring grants, applying for some grants to perform it more in Southern Oregon and bring it more to communities here. Also, I think at this point, Gina and a lot of the other collaborators here are just chomping at the bit to do more. Like obviously there's a ton of really gorgeous creative energy around this initiative. So
this is a great story. And I guess the only, not to end it on this note, but the only thing when Gina came here, I said, did you interview any pollinator people? And she's like, oh, I've got so many pollinator people in my life, but we didn't, I didn't see one reference to butterflies or anything. It's the only drawback.
True.
That's the only drawback.
I think also
there were no butterflies in this.
The one drawback. Some of the conversations post show that I've had, like one of the questions is like, wait, that was devastating and beautiful. What about the resiliency part?
I know. Everybody wants to give you, like, you have to do it all. Like, Greta has to know the energy policy, the rivers policy, the wetlands policy, the economic policy, not just trees.
What's the solution?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of room in there. I don't know what it looks like exactly, but like, just to name, gosh, going into this work about the economy has revealed that maybe it's deeply about care. And interspecies care and care for each other and vulnerability. And so I think it's another piece to ally with the folks who are working on the ground, not just in theater, but in the envisioning of ways of caring for home and people and descendants. And
let's not jump. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we do have to close out here. But the idea of well, you can't do it all, you can't say it all, you can't express it all. That's the multiplicity of it. You just have to do lots of different things and bring it out in lots of different ways. And also, the arts makes more money than it's a very profitable industry. So we can and we do arts a lot here. So that's an easy sell, I think, in our community. I could see us really developing more with this. And as patriarchy falls, we see more of the feminine pursuits. So here's to that revolution and evolution. That's what we want. And one thing you were talking about, the economy, I just want to put a little bug in your ear, Elliott. Alphabet and the Goddess Leonard Shlain.
Formative text for this work.
Yes. Okay. Because I came upon it and I've been like all high on it. So I'm excited about it. So, go ahead.
Can I just plug in, if you want to reach out and talk to us about it, collaborate, beyondboomandbust.com is great, or gina.dancefarm@gmail.com.
Okay.
If you want to keep rural Oregon dancing,
yes,
please reach out, get in touch. There's so many ways to care.
Yeah.
And the Facebook, what is the Facebook?
Beyond Boom and Bust.
Okay, that's fantastic. And we are going to be posting this video on the Facebook page. So let's say bye on camera.
Harvey.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
listeners.
I love actors and dancers so much. Okay, well, I do have to go because we got another show coming up. But you have been listening to Honey Culture Radio. This was a couple hours where we talked about our honey culture. So glad you could be with us. And thanks, you guys, for being here. It was such an honor to have you in the house. We'll be here next week, and we're going to start our new have an elders visiting and have a half an hour in Spanish, but I'm not sure if that'll be by the end of the month, so I just want you to keep you up on that. And you have been listening to KSKQ 89.5 FM in Ashland, Oregon, KSKQ translator K231C Dub, and 94.1 FM in Medford. You can catch us live streaming on your computer, kskq.org. Next week is our fundraiser, so come have fun with us. And what else do I want to say? Any views expressed during the show are those of us and our guests. They don't necessarily represent the views of KSKQ, the Multicultural Association of Southern Oregon, or any of our underwriters of KSKQ, unless they also agree with us. So thanks for listening, and let's take it out with some more. I'm going to take it out. Did we listen to this one? We did. Let's listen to this one. I'm going to put it up here. And then I'm going to move it over there. I'm going to push play because I know exactly what I'm doing. Thanks for listening.
Yes.
Yes. Play for them. Oh, wait, that's the wrong thing.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Wow, what a
Laura.
gift.
That was fun.
What a gift.
Yes.
What a
Good
show.
Yeah, that was really good. This will be fun. Bye, everybody out there in the media land.